great. So it's 3:02 and let's get started. So we have people joining in. So to give you background, thank you everyone for joining on Thursday afternoon. So our routine time is 11 o'clock, but today we are doing this webinar at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining in. So for people who are joining first time, let me give you background about EliteCISOs. So we have EliteCISOs is a group for CISOs by CISOs. So it's been 3 years now where we came together and created a group for CISOs. Before COVID, definitely we used to meet physically, but now it's been 18 months now. Everything is almost virtual. Although we do have some physical events, but yeah, I think mostly everything is virtual now. To give background about EliteCISO, who are we? We are the group of people spread across the entire country. We are having governance body. We have co-founders who came together, on this approach of knowledge sharing piece. We also have chapter leads. You can see here. So we have different chapters across the country, and we do have one international chapter. As long as if we talk about our initiative, so we are very active in CISO fitness. So if you are a good runner, or if you want to take that challenge, working out every day, do come here at CISO fitness area and do join us. We do have different events I'll be talking about post this session. Now let me come back on the topic for today, which is reducing data bloat. Right, the name looks little confusing. That's why we have people and panelists. We have experts like Anurag. So let me introduce everyone. So we have Anurag Nalwade from Blancco. He's country manager. Anurag, if you can just say hi to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Great, we can hear you well. And let me introduce our experts, panelists. So we have Gaurav Gupta, Associate Director, Cybersecurity and Risk Advisory, Deloitte. Hi, Gaurav.
Hi.
We have Manish Saigal, Partner Risk Advisory, Deloitte. Hi, Manish. And we have Anupita Daga, President and CISO, Yes Bank. Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Great. Thank you so much for your introduction and hi. At least we know that you're moving and you're talking. So moving further on the problem, right? Let's understand what the actual problem is, right? Let's understand the concept. What is reducing data bloat from our expert, Anurag. So Anurag, over to you. If you can share your screen.
Sure. Thank you, Phal. Jen, could you please help me with the share screening? Yeah. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it is. Please go ahead.
Okay, all right, thank you. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining in this Thursday afternoon. It's become a habit for everyone to connect virtually, so appreciate your time over here. So to quickly get on to the topic, as we all know, this today we're going to speak about the effects which data bloating has over information, over security, and over violation of any compliances. So the point to start for us is just to be on the same page. We would be discussing for a minute about what exactly do we mean by data bloat. It's also referred by different words like data glut if you search over the internet, but essentially it's data accumulation, and accumulation happens due to the reasons which you can see on the screen. It's called as raw data, redundant, obsolete, and trivial. And to put it simply, redundant data is when when the process is not set up in any corporate or any organization, due to which the duplication of data is increasing. So by process, I mean over here is if you know that the same file is being copied at 10 or 20 locations and you have no way to track it or no way to take care of it, then that is what is redundant data. Obsolete, in very simple terms, is that data which you will most likely not access ever. And as many organizations, as they're working for years and years, we all would agree that there's a large chunk of obsolete data, especially if the retention policies are not being implemented very well. You know that that data cannot be said as unimportant. It is definitely important, but you're not going to need it. Maybe it served its purpose. And trivial data is where it is something which is trivial, which is not even important. Things like a personal information of employees, or some music, or some videos. So these three types of data, if they're not, if there's no process to handle or process to manage this data, it is going to get accumulated, and that is what we refer to as data bloat. Now, at first, this generally when I've had discussions, this doesn't seem like a very big problem, but it does have really massive implications. And we're going to start with a couple of implications, although it's not limited to these. But the first and the major one is actually that the more data you have, the bigger the security risk, especially because the same file, in case if it's confidential in nature, it could be accessed in different ways on different devices and on different platforms. That means that you need to protect that file at those many places. And it's something which can be explained better when we look at it through a information lifecycle or an asset lifecycle perspective. So information lifecycle, again, it's something which we all know, that data goes through a certain lifecycle, a certain file or a folder. It gets created, it gets used, processed, it is shared within the team, archived, and then destroyed. And the point is that if you do not have a proper process to destroy data, or to make sure that the data is not there on the devices, then this is going to pose security risk. Generally, the usual examples when we have seen this is when a certain file is being processed on an endpoint, or it is being shared between different teams. That is the time when, due to this sharing, there's no mechanism to destroy the data after the purpose is served. And if more of such instances happen, then it gets accumulated, and there's duplication of data. If there is no, generally we speak a lot about retention policies, but again, not every time it is implemented as it is supposed to. If it is not implemented, then again, there are issues where that data can be accessed. And this is again a very natural thing for us, but it also is a problem when the assets or IT assets, for simplification, I would refer to it as endpoints, maybe desktops or laptops, when they are moving across a cycle. So there would be a certain point, maybe after 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, when that device needs to move, maybe internally, or maybe it might go outside the premise of the organization as well. So outside the premise would typically mean a refresh cycle. Internally is maybe if an employee leaves, he exits, then his machine is going to get associated to someone else. So even during such time, if there is no proper policy or no proper processes or framework to make sure that the data doesn't flow along with the device, then that is a certain risk for the organization, because the organization doesn't know whom that device is going to land up with. Having said that, this generally is also mentioned in almost all compliances. They may not, use the same words, but it is the general words which are used, like if it's a removable device, or if it's a device which is capable of storing data, then it's your job to make sure that the data is sanitized properly, it is erased properly. And if that doesn't happen, then this is also going to cause the second problem which we mentioned, that it is going to be a violation of data protection laws. And this is a sort of a problem which is increasing by the time. So 20 years back, maybe there were just a few handful of regulations, and today that problem has increased a lot, because you have to make sure that you're compliant with the regulations which are of importance to you. And again, this is a problem which doesn't come as a surprise to anyone on the call, I'm sure, is that every 2 years there are new compliances which come. In fact, one of the ones which I just came to know today morning was that of Saudi Arabia, where they came up with their first privacy law to protect the information, the personally identifiable information. And all these have a common point of, whenever the data is being processed or managed, then to avoid violation of those laws, you need to have a process where the data is not there when it is not required. It is either erased, or there is some form of form or method by which you are destroying that data, or maybe taking care of it such that it doesn't go in the wrong hands. Having said that, security risk and data protection law being the two major issues, there are other issues which are not as serious, but definitely issues for sure for any organization, is that if you're not being conscious about this data, then you're going to definitely increase your storage cost. This is just a number which I found in one of my researches, where if you look at the cost for your ROT data, it is almost more than $2,000 per TB. Now, the cost is not too high as such, but the point is that it is also increasing your security risk. It's also increasing your violation risk, and it is also giving you some cost as well. Of course, it goes without saying that it increases the issues, like you have to make more backups, or you're going to take more time to find a certain file or folder, because there's just so much of data which may or may not be required. So this is what data bloat is and what its effects are. So, Phal, I think it would be interesting for me also to listen to the panel on what their suggestions or thoughts or experiences are with respect to this problem.
Absolutely, Anurag. Let me tell you this. Every problem what you have mentioned, part of your slide, I think I agree with all of them, right? The idea is I cannot say no to any of the problems. Let us also understand from the industry people. Let's start with Manish. If you can tell us your view about the current problem, right? Anurag have dictated a structure problem, but we need to understand from the industry perspectives.
Thank you, EliteCISO, for having me here. Honor to be part of this group. And I think Anurag actually simplified the problem by giving it a broad sort of an abbreviation, be it a bloat or be it anything else. But the problem is very, very real. And Phal, in my experience, what I have seen that it's not only about personal data. Personal data becomes important, especially when we talk about the privacy laws. But for me, it's about data, which can be business data or can be a personal data. And not now, not yesterday, but for years, there has been a tendency for users to hold back on their data. There is not enough tendency of letting the data go out. I still remember early on, maybe about a decade back or maybe before that, whenever there was a discussion that can we get rid of data, there was always an apprehension why to delete it. I'm not even talking about secure erasure, what Anurag is coming to. I'm just talking about simple deletion, because there was always a anxiety, a question mark. What if I need this data tomorrow? Now that has really been the most, I would say, impetus for why we end up being in a situation of a data bloat or a rot. So there are technical means of erasing the data. There are secure means of erasing the data. But we as users and the owners and the custodians of data, we have to accept that there is an end of data lifecycle. Someday or the other, we have to get the data out of our premise. Privacy becomes important because there are regulatory reasons which give us a push. But there are equally compelling non-privacy reasons, even for our own business data, which we should get rid of. One of the problems, or I would say, just to put a spotlight on what Anurag had mentioned, that it is also a problem for us to retain that data, apart from the cost of hosting, right? I mean, that could be the cheapest of affairs. I would say the hosting data is not a problem. But for me, the canvas of my data, or I would say the landscape, is becoming increasing day by day. I will be able to control or put the right set of controls only to the data which is meaningful for me. But if I have an expanding canvas which increases day by day, my ability to control, put the right risk controls to it, apart from regulatory affairs, becomes equally difficult. So for me, I think the problem stands into the mindset and acceptance of our business users that we have to get the data out at one day. Where what is that one day that can be decided? And then, of course, there are technical means for us to address. Those are my two immediate sense. For back to you.
Very, very crisp. Thank you for that input. So let me come to Anupita, ma'am. So what are your views from, let's say, regulatory perspective or the current problem perspectives? Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So actually, we all are talking the same thing, but just coming back to whether it is only for the banking industry, I think it is not only for the banking industry, but the same is being faced by all the industries. One thing only that we are concentrating our discussion on the data, okay? But what is the problem statement? Yes, problem statement having the redundant data is one part of it, but what exactly the spread? And again, as Manish said, that maybe a decade back the problem was something else. Like people will hold back the data, saying that, oh, okay, I'm in the branch, I'm sitting in the branch. If I have to service the customer, then what? So let me keep a copy of it, right? So the whole focus was on the availability and the servicing part of it. But that time there was no focus on confidentiality and privacy. And I remember, like in my previous job or some other industry, data was the oil, and you sell one part, and then within 24 hours you will start receiving a call saying that, okay, you're paying so much, I'll give you for lesser one, right? I mean, again, 20 years back, if we have seen the credit card kind of frauds, well, the credit cards were very new in the market. You give the KYC document, and in next 2-3 days, you will have some other credit card saying that, oh, I have your data, you don't have to do anything, just this is a form, give a sign, and then I'll give you a credit card. And that time, for the young generation, having a credit card was a social status. And maybe some of us would have that evidence saying that having a credit card was a status symbol kind of thing. So I think the industry has evolved. Again, the way the processing has evolved. Cloud, we were never talking about the cloud, but in last 10 years we are talking about the cloud, and now today we are talking about cloud as the preference, cloud as the first strategy, and on-prem as the second strategy. So if you see the data which is spread, it is inevitable that we are going to have redundant data, because branch is keeping the data to themselves because they want to service the customer. The data has to be there in the data center. The data, because we are adopting cloud, so some system, and it is a hybrid environment, so some systems are in the cloud and some systems are on-prem. We are having a third party. And again, this is what we are talking about, the legit infrastructure, what we have set up, right? But we also need to see that the data is beyond what we have set up as the people, process, technology, everything. So much of data is available in the dark web. Okay, and then regulator is expecting us that we should also have an eye on the data what is being published in the dark web also. So it's like what we talk about is that from network perspective, there is no perimeter, right? For the data also, there is no perimeter, right? Data is lying everywhere, so it's very, very obvious that we are going to have redundancy in the data. Plus, coming back to Fal's question, is that regulator is making fiduciary responsible for keeping the data privacy and the secrecy. So that is a big problem. And when and you have any data leakage, by default the regulator will send saying that, okay, what is your exposure, tell me. Okay, so we need to have a very strong monitoring on our on-site, on-prem, as per our standard infrastructure, as well as what is beyond that. So our traceability has to go beyond what we are sharing it knowingly and what is happening unknowingly also. So I think problem can be extended to the next level, and that's Absolutely. What the regulator is also holding everyone responsible.
I think this is a real feel of almost all the CISOs in the industry, that everyone is facing similar issues, right? And you have rightly articulated in the very short answer. So let me ask this to Gaurav, right? So based on your experience, Gaurav, how do you see the industry is handling this kind of problems, right? And we are only talking about the problems right now.
Right. So, well, the thing is that I just want to add few things before I give the solution, or what my observation or what I experience from the industry. I think the one thing which Anurag talked about the data lifecycle or the asset lifecycle management, right? On top of it, we should put a layer of data governance as well, right? Until and unless we have not defined the specific roles, like who is the data owner, who is the data steward, right? So all these things should be managed at the data governance layer, so that the data should be adequately managed till the last stage or the last leg of the data lifecycle management, right? That's one point which I want to talk about. Second, I think Manish already talked about the stretching of the canvas, right? The way the data is exploding every day, right? As per the BAU, definitely the risk appetite is increasing for at the enterprise umbrella. So we have to manage from a risk lens as well. Second, the TCO, I think everybody is talking about, that can be taken care of, but why? And the way industry is moving into today's digital world, I think the first solution is something that the discovery of my critical data. And definitely I am very much aligned to what Manish stated, that I am not taking any piece of critical data as a PII, right? Definitely the previously, the GDPR, when the GDPR came, it is a talk of the town, right? Then the CCPA came, and now we are heading towards the Indian PDP bill as well. Now, coming back to what is the critical data and why the C-suite or the top leadership should be aware or should be something concerned about. So it should look every data element which is sensitive to my business operations on a routine basis. It should not be only typical to my data subjects or to the PII level itself, right? So we have to first maintain the critical data inventory. That is the first phase. Second, what is the DFD around it, how it is classified, whether I have an enterprise data classification schema enabled in my environment or not, or what is the key categories we have defined around, and how we have implemented the critical controls, like Anuprita talked about the encryption. Now, the moment in a real world, I have seen these challenges within the BFSI. The moment I say and I talk about that from an auditor side of you, that you have to enable your this particular CHT, talk about from a PCI DSS lens, that requirement talks about that the CHT has to be encrypted in the data at rest with the AES 256-bit encryption. The moment you go to the business function stakeholder, he said, no, boss, I will take it as an exception because my performance will get lagged. So you have to come out with some innovation technology like DDM, the dynamic data masking, right? Which is on the fly, you are masking the data wherein there is no control which is required at the database layer. So even at the third party in the extended environment like CSP. So all these things definitely contribute what is the requirement and how I am sufficing the overall sanity of my data or the hygiene of the data at the enterprise level. So these are few other things which I have talked about. And last is that even from a previously regulatory side, right, there is a requirement of the PIA. And everybody is talking about that, yeah, I have to do my PIA and all that stuff. But I would say that again, I'm circling back on the same thing, that the enterprise should look at the way they are doing the ISMS audits or the ISO 27001 or other compliance audits. They should look from the data protection angle, that to maintain that hygiene of the data protection or the sensitive data, they should not only specific to the PII or the PIA assessments, they should look at as a data protection assessment in a holistic side purview, so that the people should consider that every data which I am storing, whether at the endpoint level, whether at the application layer, whether at the database, or even in the extended environment, what is critical, what is I require, or what is aligned to my business requirement. And then it will take care of all these problems. That's what from my point of view.
Thank you, Gaurav. I think you spoke about problem and solution both. We will come back to you again for the right solution. So let me now give the rise to Anurag. Anurag, if you can help us to understand, let's say we all talk about problem, and then all the audience, the individuals are kind of acknowledging the fact that, okay, this is a problem. Can we now move to the solution piece of it? Probably a potential solution.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Pal. So I think it was quite interesting for me also to get different perspectives, like starting from the point of what Manish said. We know on one hand that the canvas is increasing, the data canvas is increasing because data is exploding, and but the mindset is not changing of taking erasing it or destroying it. And at the same time, all the compliances or the regulations which are coming, as Anuprita said, the fiduciaries are being held responsible for that. So the obvious answer is, of course, to destroy that data, so that the data bloat doesn't occur. But it's a bit more complex, or it has to be given a thought on how do you go about it. That's where what Gaurav said, that you need to have a proper governance framework around what your policies are going to be around it. So policy-based data disposal is one of the ways to do it. I do see that there are other ways as well, but of course you have to measure the pros and cons, referring to the point that it should also not lead to any performance issues. So when we come to the solution as policy-based data disposal, what do these policies look like? And to speak about it, actually, like any other thing, like if you want to focus on something, you have to focus on what you don't want to do, and then the focus is highlighted on the aspect which is important. So that's how we thought would be a good way to show the policies as well. We would be speaking first about what not to do. What are the common mistakes which organizations do when they are looking to have a policy-based data disposal approach. So with respect to what not to do, just to simplify it in very rudimentary terms, data should not be recovered. So it looks like very simple, but we've seen many organizations whose policies say that you have to format the hard disk, or just shift delete the files which are not required. And yeah, those we come from a background where we thought that these methods are trustable, and maybe at some time they were, but today if you just do a simple Google search, you will know that you could easily recover data from a shift deleted or a formatted hard disk. And maybe for a personal use it's still fine, but are we ready to take that risk for an organization or any enterprise? Of course the answer is no. So we should not be going with not just these two methods, but any method which has any possibility of recovery. The other thing is that in some cases the data is destroyed, but you are not able to verify that. And there are some methods mentioned over here on the screen: physically destroying it, degaussing, low level formatting, or just storing it in a room. There's still many organizations who still do this. Instead of returning their faulty hard drives in a data center, they prefer to store it in a data center. But again, it's not a scalable approach. But if you have 2 data centers or 5 data centers across the country, how is the management going to ensure that all the hard disks are being stored, or maybe nothing is getting lost? Is there maybe a single dashboard where this can be viewed? Because depending on people to confirm it over phone or emails, it's just not something which is the right approach, considering the risk associated to it in today's time and age. And the last thing which organizations should avoid is not choose a process which is not configurable. So going ahead, we will also be speaking about policies which in a way will define some aspects of data disposal where which may not be possible with physical destruction, or maybe degaussing, or maybe even using a software based wipe. So once you have decided your policies, and these policies would be based on the compliances which are important for you, your ecosystem, what line of business you are. Once those are decided, then whichever system you have chosen, that should be configurable to align to those policies. So these are the 3 common mistakes which we have generally seen. Many organizations, when they start to have a proper data disposal policy, these are the steps, or these are the issues which they face. Because when you look at it through a traditional perspective, you come across ways where people have drilled hard disk, or maybe they have methods like just shredding the hard disk or something. So that's not something which is going to be useful considering today's situation. And now once we have defined what not to do, for what to do in terms of defining data disposal policy, again, I think, Phal, it would be good for us to maybe listen to the panel and then come across those points.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the right thing. So So I would like to ask, let's say, Anupita, on this aspect, that how, let's say, we all know the problem. Now, how do we solve it, either unstructured way or a traditional way, or how do we improvise on that part?
So, as Anurag said, that the traditional way is not going to be sustainable, right? So obviously we will have, and we should go with policy way. And as Gaurav also said, that first of all, when we talk about a policy, first of all, whoever is owner of the data, the business, and mainly the business, because if the data is not available, who is going to be worst impacted is going to be a business first, right? Because that business process will have an impact. So first of all, business need to understand what my data is, what is the value of my data, and if I don't have the data, then or if I have a redundant data, then what is going to be my impact? And that policy also, that ownership should remain with the business. And what is sustainable is that, because the technology will change, people will change, processes will change, but what will but what will be consistent is the business process model. And so business owners should understand that, okay, this is the importance of my data, and even if I'm having a change in my the operations, the way I'm performing my operations, my policy of majorly of my policy will more or less remain same. And with the change in my operations, what will be the impact on my data, and accordingly I need to change the policy. And even if we change the policy, and if and the whole, I mean, I'm saying that the same concept of data disposal, if we extend it to a throughout a life cycle, I think that will also be a good idea. For example, in the business process, and if we consider the Privacy Act, it talks about that collect the data what is needed. Don't collect the excess of data. Don't collect whatever is not needed, right? Because you are unnecessarily, without any objective, you are increasing the risk. Okay, so it is right from collection to the processing to the storage and the disposal. And the same thing, if we attach that to a policy, okay, that will cover end to end. You know, processing, sharing, disposal, and it can also be extended to a monitoring, because today what we are monitoring, again, if you wear a cybersecurity hat, you know, we define the policy on a annual basis, or you know, biannual basis. We review the data, or rather discussions on the monitoring policy with businesses and all. But if we attach that to a policy, then that policy should drive it end to end. You know, it should be a mature eventually, because that's a process and it's a new concept. And thanks for sharing this concept, that it never came to my mind, although in a raw way, but not in such a methodical way. So it's a good input for us practitioners also. It should be like the way we define the employee policy, like there is no art left to it, you know. For employee engagement process, you know, you have recruitment, you have during engagement and post engagement, and even data management should start similar to that, right? You know, your pre-collection, which is process definition, to the collection, which is your recruitment, your processing, storage, and sharing, and all. That is also, you know, your during recruitment, and disposal is your F&F settlement kind of thing, right? So that if we really extend that concept end to end, I think that will give us a good visibility about it. And in the Privacy Act, what it talks about, right to information, to whom it is being shared, right to forget, if we have the transparency, and if we tag that to a policy, then I think you know, we will not be working in a patchwork for each process to process, but everything will go smooth. So it's a very nice concept.
Great, thanks for that input. I think structured way of defining the process will also help us in our future Data Privacy Act, Data Privacy Bill, which is coming along,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Very, very well articulated. Yeah. So Manish, over to you. How do you see the industry is creating this framework? How do you see that, okay, what all mandates should be part of the ecosystem? And just to extend what Anuprita said, it's a joint responsibility. We can define a policy, but then someone will have to actually adopt it or implement it, right?
And I think Anuprita has beautifully answered most of the viewpoints that we wanted to bring to the picture. But to add to what she said, according to me, Fal, if we are able to get this mind share, that data needs to be disposed, I think half of the battle is won. We don't have that mind share. I'm not talking about this community of CISOs. I'm talking about the larger community with whom the data exists. So that's first way for me to look at it. So we have to get that mind share, right? For which we need to educate, we need to have those discussions. As I said, that technology can be brought in, but ability and acceptance to use is the problem. Second most important point is that even if you are able to get that mind share, you know, of late we have realized that most of the time when we as advisors and consultants are called, the significant portion of the discussion of focus is towards the early part of the life cycle. How will I get the data? How do I ensure the data integrity, data quality, you know, during the early stages of the life cycle? There has not been much focus on how to get rid of the data. And again, I'm bringing my point that for us, the focus is the entry, storage, processing, but not really that much, because we'll say we'll figure out what we want to do with the data. And I think that is where I'm again re-emphasizing that if we get the mind share that we have to get rid of the data, we'll find means of doing it. So for me, that's very, very important point. And how we do it is, of course, the structure that Anuprita has called out. I'll just take one of the points from Anuprita's side and give a bit of an explanation to it. When we talk about putting a policy for our disposal, or even a policy for working, I would say, I always refer back to the GAP, the generally accepted privacy principles, and the principle that specifically talks about data minimization, something that Anuprita also alluded to. There are three aspects of data minimization. The first, and I call them ARL, where A stands for adequacy. You need to ensure that you have just an adequate data which is required. L is a relevance, that whatever is the purpose is that getting linked with the data that you have. And L stands for limited, in the sense that have the limited duration and the data that is required. So these are the ARL is the three principles based upon which the data minimization concept is called out. Although data minimization is more around the privacy angle, but I'm saying that the principle can still be taken for the larger context. So why do I have that data? Why do I need to store that data? Is it really required for me? I think those are the things that we require to get into the aspects of framework or the governance and the data management part that Gaurav and Anuprita had alluded to. Additionally, who defines whether I have adequate data? Who defines whether this is relevant, and who defines whether it is limited? There is no regulatory authority who can come and tell us. We as a decision, business will have to decide it. There are definitely some prescribed requirements when it comes to retention of data, and we have to figure out, when the retention is adequate, what we do it. But again, I'll go back, getting the mind share and ensuring the data minimization principle are the three key aspects. Another interesting statistic that I would like to bring to the table is that last year we did a data restriction survey with Blancco, and there were many interesting artifacts pretty much on these lines. But something that I want to call out is that we asked a question to the survey participants as to what is done with the data when it reaches its retention period, right? So assume that the retention period has been achieved. What you do? One of the 5 respondents didn't even know that they have a retention policy. This again goes back to the point that we need to have and ensure that awareness is built. People are aware that disposal is important, and there are ways of doing it in correspondence to a retention policy. Now, let's say that people realize that the retention period has been achieved. What do we do next? And the interesting answer was 15% said that we just reclassify the data into another category. So they're just reclassifying, which is not the right means, but they're reclassifying the data and saying that it continues the restriction. About 16.7% people chose the option of pseudonymization and anonymization, which is again no destruction. So they said that we are going to anonymize the data in the sense from a privacy angle, it doesn't become Manish Sehgal's data. So the data exists, but probably the identification of Manish Sehgal may not be able to be retracted, which is again not a way of saying that the data has been disposed. 20% people chose others when they have nothing else to choose. They operate for others. 30% chose erase automatically, which was still encouraging to read. And most surprising was 35% people said that they turned over to the business process owners for the final disposition. So as an IT team, they give it back 35% of those back to the business users. And I may be proven wrong, and I'm sure that the business user will never go and delete the data. So in totality, the data always continues to exist. So that's where the problem statement lies for me, Paul, that based upon the data and the survey we did last year and the few of the artifacts that I mentioned, that getting the mind share, having the principle and the structure from the data minimization perspective, increasing the awareness about retention requirement and policy, and finally ensuring that you get rid of the data are the underlying principles or underlying structures I would say that we require. Blancco and Anurag's team can bring a classical solution for us to help it, but we need to accept its usage and getting into our production system. Back to you, Paul.
Very well articulated. I think one point which I have noted is it's all about RACI metrics. It's all about accountability and responsibility. That let's say if they don't accept the fact that okay, this is their data, right? We always pass on this to business. Okay, this is business data, right? But do they really accept it? And if they don't, it's always technology or risk issue, right? And you'll be only passing the ball between the teams. But rightly said, Manish. So let me ask this to Gaurav. Gaurav, and we are expecting more technical answer as well, since we want you to talk about that.
Okay, so I will just pick from where Manish talked about the anonymization, and I think I also read that response from the survey paper. So definitely the people are really, we need to make awareness in the larger group or the larger audience, what exactly it means, right? And when we say technology, and to be honest, I can correlate one of the very recent incident wherein one of the group CISO called me and he said that Gaurav, we need to implement it. And this is a global customer. So they are come under the EU region, and they said that we have to entertain this right to delete or right to forget article, right? And this is something from the GDPR forte. Now coming back to this, even he said that I don't know how many instances of this data subject has been in my current production environment, right? I really don't know. So what I talked about earlier was even if you have that maintained that critical data inventory, right, and you are maintaining all the controls, even the mindset is something which you need to create. Second thing is the pseudonymization. The people should understand what is the technology is all about. It is not something that when you are giving a notification to the data subject that yes, we are erasing all your data and this is a notification or acknowledgement from our side, still you are maintaining some metadata in your backend environment, right? So the purpose is not solved. Until and unless the third party auditor comes out and he comes out with that metadata, definitely it will be a legal or a financial obligation to the enterprise. Now, how we can do this? And this has to be a bit technical rather than a physical effort, because even I don't know how many instances in one database I am managing that particular entry of the data subject, right? So the logical deletion, if it's not immediate, we can't do the physical deletion of the data, at least we can enable the logical deletion by some or the other technology tools and methodologies. So that is something which we have to create a policy around all these sensitive data elements like a PII or a PHI or a CHT, or even the enterprise critical data, which is a very sensitive one, or a restricted data elements for an enterprise. So in case these kind of regulatory requirements are applicable in my production environment, definitely there should be some technology or a automation kind of a central cockpit from where we can manage it, and in one go we can just do the logical deletion, so that even I can have some justification or a safeguard for the supervisory authority or from the regulatory side of view that my business is not using as of today. Once my physical deletion, this routine will come, definitely we will physically delete the complete data physically. But as of now, it is logically deleted. It's masked. Nobody is touching, even not the privileged users. So those kind of a technologies controls has to be implemented in the environment.
Absolutely, very well said. I think I agree with you, Gaurav. It's just that like me and other my fellow members who have implemented DLP or IRM kind of solutions, they know the pain, right? The technology looks easy, but when it goes to people for acceptance or usage, their actual pain starts, right? So before I ask Anurag the next question, I would like to ask everyone that if you have any question in mind, if you want to talk to the panelists, or we will have a spare time after 5 minutes. Where we'll be taking your questions. So put your question on the chat and we'll take your questions. Yeah. Coming back to Anurag. So Anurag, if you can help us to understand the solution more better around the policy.
Sure. So I think, frankly, I don't have much to add with respect to the strategic or tactical aspects of the policy. Like everyone, Manish, Anuprita, and Gaurav said, changing that mindset, it all starts from the mindset. Now, in case if we reach a point where organization has a mindset to take care of the data, then how would they do it? So to simplify it, let's say in a hypothetical situation, you know that there are certain data sets or certain devices which need to be erased. Maybe again, just to simplify, you have an IT asset management system where you know that there are 10,000 laptops which your organization uses across the country or across the globe. So you know that when these laptops are going to transit, then there has to be a compulsory stage of erasure, provided the mindset is there, of course, as I said earlier. But when it comes to the ground level, to your point, Fal, it's very difficult to expect organizations to do that reconciliation. It's not that I'm okay that the job is done 98% of the times and 2% leeway can be given. That's not something which works in information security, or for that matter, data disposal. Everything, it has to work. It is a 0 or a 1. It's either 100% or it's 0. There is no in between. So for that, once these devices have been identified, then the logical step is to do or have a way to reconcile that whenever the device moved outside the organization, or maybe it transitioned within, or maybe my data center went onto the cloud, was there a proper step followed? And I should be able to, or the management should be able to just look onto a single dashboard and see that. And such kind of a capability is possible when you think of this policy where your data disposal system is also talking to other systems in your organization. You might have some system where you're storing IT asset information. Like I said, all the hardware information. Some people, I think most organizations globally store it in ServiceNow nowadays. So taking that as an example, if you have data stored in ServiceNow, then you should have a system. The data disposal system should be talking to ServiceNow, and you don't have to keep this process of manually reconciling. Because when that happens, then there is every possibility that with the scale which large organizations operate at, there will be a chance that even with the right mindset, there would be some devices or some data sets which will not be destroyed, even though they are supposed to. So I think to conclude with respect to this specific point, my suggestion is to when the policies are defined, look at the systems which would make which would help you realize that policy. It never goes the other way around. You can't look at the technology and then decide the policy. Policies, like everyone in the panel discussed, those have to be defined first, and then just an example of how integrations would help you achieve those policies. So that is one of the points which I feel fall with respect to the things which had been said.
Great, thanks for that input. Let me ask you one question, Gaurav, since this is more relevant to you. You're sitting at a scenic place. So let's say while defining this work policy, how do we consider this work from home scenario, right? And we all know that this will stay for some time. So if you feel that we all will work from office, then you can decide some set of policy. But if you're working from home, the combination, the asset is really not on site. How do we handle the challenge?
So definitely, and this is a new normal, right? And everybody is struggling with and I think today the market is quite maturing, considering that everybody is aware of this is not a short stint of the remote operational environment, right? So everybody is working from wherever the or I would say work from home, rather than we should replace this word from work from anywhere, right? Because people are moved outside the enterprise environment. So the moment we talk about that, yes, this data has to be from the endpoint security, what the data should be retained, and definitely the solution like Blancco, right? When the data is already there, and we really don't know, and we really don't have that kind of a from an enterprise level, we have to put a solution that it should automatically delete the data when it is coming to the endpoint, rather than we are asking or checking or monitoring the data at the endpoint on a day-to-day basis, like a DLP or from the endpoint EDR kind of a solution. I would say that the data sanitization solution should be as a deployed as a central cockpit, from where we just monitor the data which needs to be deleted, and it should be automated rather than as a physical effort to going to the individual, taking a remote session and then delete the content. I would say it should be something like that. We should create a policy which should align to the applicable compliances or regulatory requirements, what is required, and this should be aligned to my enterprise data clustering schema as well, the respective categories. So on that note, this policy has to be defined, and this has to be deleted automatically. So that should be one of the solutions, considering that everybody is working from remote as of today.
Interesting. Manish, your views on defining the data disposable policy?
So, well, I think we covered, with my conversation and Anurag. This also reminds me of pulling out one interesting statistics file from our survey, and it was with respect to what is the frequency of performing the data destruction, right? So let us assume that the retention is over, and you do it now. Whether you do by synonymization or by giving it back to the business user, that is debatable. But what is the frequency? And 10% people said it's quarterly. 1.6% respondents said it is semi-annual. About 18.3% said it is annual. 3.3% said it is once in 2 years. More than 2 years was 1.7%. 51% said it is as and when required, and then 13% said never. And the point I'm trying to, and why I brought this point, is that it is just not about policy. See, the policy can give you the direction, what to do, how to do, and when to do, but it should not be just a document in place. The statistic that I just shared with you, it seems that the adherence of the policy is a very, very important aspect, and we have to have that way of clearly calling it out. Now, why it should be annual versus semi-annual, or versus as and when required? As and when required is as good as saying that we will never do it, right? So I think the point that I'm trying to highlight is that once the framework in respect to data governance, data management, ownership, RACI, technology, I think we spoke all the aspects. Another very important point will be to ensure it is getting implemented in a rightful manner. Now, what is the means of destruction? Whether you want to go it manual way, we want to go it automated way, we want to get it a certified way, those can be debated upon various factors. But it's very important that we don't leave something as a piece of a policy just for a check in the box. Yes, we have a retention policy, we have a disposal policy. If we don't really do an implementation or thorough implementation of it, I think it will not give any use to us. That's additional remark I wish to make, Fal.
Absolutely. I think I've noted two things. One is if you want to solve the problem, we'll have to accept that there is a problem. Second, when we write that, okay, we'll do whenever we need or whenever, let's say, on case-to-case basis, that's a right way to say no, right? We'll never do it. But that's a fair input. Manish, very well articulated. So last point from Anupita ma'am. So from an industry perspective, how do you see that defining this data disposable policy will be actually handled?
So as I said, it should be a framework. Okay, framework should start with the business. Okay, what should be the disposable policy, which can be really up to a business and the regulatory requirement, and no frame fits all. Every industry will have a different disposal policy or usage policy. And it's a digital world, so it may be that partial data might be disposed, partial may not be disposed, or anonymized, pseudonymized, and all, because you will also have and we are talking about the world which is artificial intelligence based, right, where we need the data. So disposal, I mean, and that's my personal view, and it is not again true or false Boolean kind of thing, but very subjective. But there should also be classification that what data to be disposed, what I need to continue, so that my artificial based intelligence rules will continue to work. I should be able to capitalize on cross-sell, upsell on the data, and for that, what is needed, and that is completely up to a business to decide, and also as per the regulatory framework that this is what can be kept it to the business for utilization. This cannot be used. It is up to a consumer as per the new Privacy Act whether I want data to be accessed. I want company to provide me a good suggestion on any of the domain. So I think it should be a little flexible on that, and you should be able to put those conditional buttons switch on and off based on the business requirement. And I think, as Gaurav said, that there need to be a soft lock, there need to be a hard lock, and it should be meant to accommodate the business processes. So I think on data disposal, I still go on a generic basis because it's going to be very subjective. What is the vision of the company? What is the strategy of the company? And your existing data, how do you utilize it to empower the consumer and to optimize your operational cost? So I think the data is, again, it's a very old world now. Data is a new oil, but that is a fact that data is a new oil, and which we are seeing it nowadays. So data, if it is a gem, it is a new oil, we need to really utilize that properly, but at the same time keep confidentiality. So we should focus on policy. If we know what is needed based and which is helping you to define the policy, then everything will fall in place. So that is, I know it's very generic, but it is going to be across the industry. So I think we'll have to leave that to the industry expert to decide it, and which is the business.
Absolutely, very well articulated. So I think we are hit on time. We're now open for question answers. So if organizer, if you can just unmute the individual who wants to ask question to the panelists. Let me see if I have anything on my chat. We can take one or max two questions. Anurag, will you be able to see this? I don't have that.
I'm not able to. Yeah, my chat is visible.
Okay.
Hi, it's the organizer here. We have some questions in the questions section, if you can see those, but I'm unable to mute the audience. Unmute the audience, rather.
No worries. I can't see that. Can you just dictate the question for us, if you're okay?
Absolutely. Let's have a look.
Yeah.
There are two major contributors to data bloat. One is legacy data and two is customer data. What is the right way to deal with contractual obligations that mandate to store such data for the period of contract, which exponentially consumes the storage space?
Very interesting question. So I think, Manish, do you want to answer this? or anyone? It's open for anyone to answer.
I didn't get the first part. So I heard saying that there's a contractual obligation to store the data and the associated cost. What? I mean, I missed. I could not hear the full one. If you can repeat.
So what is the right way to deal with the obligation to store data for a contractual period of time, either customer data or legacy data?
Okay, I mean, see, the discussion that we are having on the table is not to say that don't store the data. We are saying that store the data which is rightful, required, and is required for the purposes of processing. And when that processing purpose is over, get rid of the data. So if we have an obligation or contractual obligation while servicing a customer, which expects us to store the data for X period, X month, X years, we need to do it. I don't think anybody is recommending not to do it. But the question we are trying to put is that once that duration is over, we need to be very prompt to decide on getting that data erased, or in case there's an extension or there's a regulatory reason for us to continue that, then it's understandable. But at some point in time, there will be a stage when the data is becoming aging and it may not have a relevance. Now, whether it is 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, that again, as Anurvita said, is a very subjective point from a regulatory and the business and the user perspective. But what we are trying to contemplate is that there will be a point in time in a life cycle of a data when the data will not be required neither for contractual nor for regulatory reasons. Why to have the data at that stage? Get rid of it. And that's where the whole discussion started about the data bloat, and we try to answer that. So just to clarify, I don't think we are saying that don't keep the data. We are suggesting retain the data, meaningful data which is required for the time period is required for contractual or regulatory reasons. And after that, be prompt to get rid of it by secure erasure.
Thank you, Manish, for the answer.
Okay, Paul, I just want to add what Manish stated, right? And definitely, we are not denying to retain the data. Definitely, that's not the intent of us. The only thing is that if it's a contractual obligation, definitely you retain the data, but with adequate control structure. The way Anupita talked about the encryption, the data integrity with the SHA-2 mechanism or the AES 256-bit encryption, right? The data at rest and use or in transit, all the required controls has to be in place, right? Secondly, the other thing which I want to talk about is when the data is like how to minimize the obligation or the cost effectiveness of it. So have the trace route. When I say trace route, actually look into the map, the monitor the data, where exactly it is placed. The way you talked about that today, everybody is working from remote. And there are contractual requirements when we used to work from Odysseys, right? Very closed environment. So today, the critical data is managed by the remote environment. So all the specific controls has to be in place at the endpoint system, endpoint level, so that the data should not get leaked out. And the controls which I talked about, like EDR or a DLP or like a secure, so all this data masking or the encryption, even the disk level encryption, all these things should be managed and deployed at the endpoint level, so that this data should be effectively managed. And the less number of instances of the critical data, definitely the risk appetite will be lower at the customer side of it. So that's what I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like the next question?
I'm really sorry. We'll have to now move further. It's already 4 o'clock. But I would request Anurag if you can just one-to-one answer the questions. That will be helpful for audience to get the view from. So in case you need, you can talk to the panelists as well separately. Thank you so much for that. Now we are moving further on our agenda. So this is the last part of it. So we are moving to Wheel of Fortune, and this is the fortune where we have added 100 names who are first registered, and we have removed the Gmail. So the first winner is, the only winner for the smartwatch is Abhishek Mathur. Abhishek, if you can say hi to us on chat. The only clause will have to be there, or you should be there, part of the audience to have this particular draw. Sorry, we don't have. If you can just run. Do you have Abhishek? Sorry, yeah, we are moving further. We are running this again to find the right person for.
Oh, Abhishek was on the line. He is here.
Okay, yeah. So this goes to Abhishek. Thank you. Sorry, just remove this. Sorry, Danish, you missed it. Great. If you can share my screen, present my screen, please. I'll just take last 2 minutes for the further future events. Organizer, have you done that?
That should be able to share your screen now.
Yes, great. So thank you so much for joining this session. I would like to introduce the next events which we have planned. So on 23rd of September, we are having sorry, this is going again. Okay, we are having an event with Shield Your Critical Assets with Sophos. And on the 25th of September, we are having event with Netscope around roadmap to SASE, right? And this is both the topics are very interesting and in demand. I would also like to introduce one more session with Blancco, which will be on 5th of October from 11 a.m. We will be sharing you the invite separately on your email on our WhatsApp groups. Lastly, I would like to, if you want to have a certificate for this particular participation, you can come to events and you can come to CPE certificate. The password for today is erasure. I will just write in chat for everyone to note. Let me write here. And organizer, if you can just send this to everyone.
We will do that.
Let me, August, one sec. ERASURE. So the password is erasure, ERASURE. Great. So with that, we are end of our discussion. I would like to thank the entire panel for giving their views, the industry expert views, and Anurag for giving us insight about crisp view about what the problem is and how do we solve the data disposable policy problem. Right. Thank you so much for joining. It was really nice having you on the webinar. Thank you so much.